we have no option but to challenge the inheritance tax proposed changes. We have got to fight, and we cannot give in on where we're at now. We've seen rolling blockades. We have strategy options, and we will have to see how it goes from here.
My name's Emma Dunwell. Welcome to a special edition of the Resistance podcast. I'm in Exeter today at Goffin Land Farms, and I'm here with Pete. Would you like to tell us a little bit about why you came today?
Well, I came here to campaign for farming and food security and to be part of a movement of people who are trying to share our concerns with the general public about the rather sorry state of farming and our rapidly falling food security. It's a wonderful conference here today. We've got some great speakers lined up, and it's very encouraging to be part of a community who are like-minded and also preparing, or actually taking active steps towards addressing the concerns that we have.
As a farmer, how has it been for you personally contesting with all the challenges that the Labour government seem to have thrown at you?
Well, the main issue that we've had from the Labour government, of course, has been the inheritance tax attack. But the problems regarding policy with farming go back a long way, arguably until back to the repeal of the Corn Laws in 1846. And certainly in modern times, we were, rather than being supported, we were being corralled into a certain narrative direction by the previous Tory government for 14 years. So the issue we really have is it's become more important to the powers to be to pursue carbon-based agendas and restore wildlife and biodiversity net gain rather than focusing on core food production. And our food security has been falling as a result very rapidly. And that is a threat to national security, of course. So farmers are trusty custodians of the land. We always want to do that and be that. And we're more than happy to address issues as they come along with our practices. And our practices have been too intensive in the past. We were bought into the paradigm of growing big and using industrial agriculture to try and chase big money at the behest of supermarket contracts. But I think the narrative is changing. We're waking up to the fact that it doesn't matter how big you get, there's always going to be a monopoly power above you, controlling you, and that monopoly tends to eventually turn against you, and you just end up doing more for the same returns out. So I'm very hopeful that things are going to change and that we're going to decentralize from that and deindustrialize in a way, in a good way, and incorporate more regenerative practices and get back to mixed farming. So there's a lot of changes, positive changes that could come, but certainly policy has not been in the right direction for a very long time. We have in fact been suffering from globalism and a lack of protectionism, price-wise, policy-wise, and there's been a slow creeping war of attrition against the profitability in farming for many decades. And that's resulted in a situation where we have asset value, but we have a very low return on investment on that. And it's very difficult to make a living. There's constantly challenges, and we're not getting the support we need from the state. And therefore, the social contract that people talk about is broken. And the social contract really should be that those who feed the nation should receive her protection. And that is now broken. And we're being corralled, as I said, down globalist agendas based on carbon emissions or reduction of carbon emissions. And it's at the behest of big corporations and a future of farming vision where we have lab-grown meat and indoor-grown food and vertical farms, etc. So I'm afraid the vision held by those in power is not the pastoral idyll that we would like it to be.
So you seem rather awake to the fact of, Agenda 2030, globalism, um, figures like Bill Gates buying up a lot of farmland, making plans for genetically modified food farms. Because of how much they've inserted themselves into our food, do you think that that could create some kind of silver lining where people are beginning to wake up and that the local market would actually be bigger than maybe it was before, because people are starting to realize that if they want to eat well, if they want to eat healthy, and they want to know what's in their food, buy local?
Yes, we are waking up. It is happening. It's frustratingly slow, but that's what meetings like this are about today. It's about coming together to really feel our own power, that we're not alone, and that we can then go out and keep spreading our work and raising awareness. And people like farmers are waking up. They know that they've fallen for the ease and consumerism of the once a week supermarket hit, but they know it's not the best food. They know they should be shopping locally and supporting local businesses. They know that, but also we're in very hard economic times. So you also have to give a little grace to people, especially if they're raising young families and they're busy working. We're now in an age where joint incomes are required to even pay the bills. So I don't blame people for having to do that, on a daily basis. But the awakening is coming, and the decentralization will occur. It's just happening slowly, but it is happening. That's the thing we got to hold on to and be very grateful for. It is happening, and I think we will see more farm shops opening up and more people just going, no, we're not going to live that way that you're trying to make us live. We are going to live how we want to live. And if that means taking a little bit more time and it being a little bit more inconvenient to go and visit a farm shop or a local business to buy your things, then that is something that we need to rejoice in. We need to rejoice in that extra effort that it takes us, because that's the bit that means we are being the change. And that's very powerful, and it will spread. And as more and more health concerns come out about supermarket food and the processed nature of food, we need to educate as much as possible and teach the children, teach the younger generations about healthy food, local food, and get them reconnected to the soil again. So good things are happening.
I was wondering, have you had any personal contesting with things like inheritance tax, feed additives? Have you been pressured at all with the Bovine or anything similar to that?
Well, I'm a salad grower, so I'm salad,
right.
organic veg, so I don't have any stock. But the Bovine has been another attack on farming. It's hurt certain dairy farmers. Arla actually are one of the better dairies to be involved in as a dairyman. So it's been a huge shock and an attack on them. But on the same note, it's also been incredibly good for raising public awareness, because we've really felt the power of social media with this one. And that's where the information is coming from. And that's where the main education is coming from. You're not going to get it from the mainstream. We know that. It's the mainstream media, the BBC especially, is nothing more than a complicit arm of propaganda for the mainstream narrative and for the political establishment as it is. So social media is growing very quickly. We need to push out on channels like that as much as possible. And it's been great to see so much Cravendale and Arla milk left on the shelves and such high demand for local dairies. It's been really, really good. So there is a silver lining to it. And I know one Arla farmer in Farmers Movement Cornwall, the group that I run in Cornwall, and he had no awareness of this trial whatsoever. He had no forward knowledge. The first he found out about it was on social media. So a lot of innocent people have been caught up in it. I'm glad they haven't been too badly affected, and we need to learn the lesson from it. And like I say, decentralize.
And the chemicals that are in these feed additives are just absolutely monstrous. I mean, so corrosive that you cannot handle them with bare skin. How is anything like that going to be safe to put in a cow that then gives us meat, milk, and do you know what I mean? It's just insane.
Well, personally, I'm way past the day where I believe them when they say it's safe and effective. And I'm not alone. And yes, I have read the safety data sheet on Bavair, and it's not pretty. It has been proven to shrink male testes, etc., and it's highly toxic. Respiration masks are needed. So I certainly won't be going anywhere near it. And of course, you know, there are applications and uses of chemistry. We know that it can be used well, but there's absolutely no justification for using this, of course, because it is a solution to a problem that doesn't exist in the first place. The whole thing is based around the carbon dioxide con, and it's about people like Bill Gates trying to control and profiteer from this kind of intervention. And he has invested in it. He's not directly invested in Bavair, but he is invested into DSM, who are the manufacturers of it, and he also has investments in Ruminate, which is an Australian company which does exactly the same thing. So
He's been very open about the fact that one of the things we need to do for Agenda 2030 is depopulate the planet. Well, how is he going to do that? And then he mysteriously invests in vaccines, feed additives for one of the animals that is a primary source of a lot of things we get. I mean, there's a lot that you can get from a cow that you can't exactly get from a chicken. You know, it's not just meat that it's affecting. Do you think that the government is purposefully throwing all of these obstacles at farmers to kind of squeeze everyone into either supermarket hyper-processed or breaking the bank to buy local? Do you think that that's a purposeful goal?
well, it's a progressive wealth transfer in terms not only of financial wealth but of power. It's pushing so that only large corporations will be able to farm. It's culling. It's a Darwinian culling of the small farm because they just simply can't make a living.
Yeah.
So they're being forced to sell up or go and do something else or have a part-time income or diversify away from actual food production, maybe do holiday lets or container storage or whatever it is to do. So getting away from core food production. And that's obviously going to be like little bubbles floating to the surface of oil. They eventually coagulate into large bubbles. And this is what they want. They want a deception going on where there's half a dozen or so large corporations controlling agriculture, but it's still a kind of guise. People still think it's not communism, but of course it is. It's just a new form of communism. It's a private equity-based collusion communism between corporates and the state, which is different to the traditional form of communism whereby the state controls everything, including the corporations. This Western version is where the private equity corporations actually control the state, but kind of by collusion and with an element of deception that it's not actually the way.
It's just how we've got the Labour government, and they're basically authoritarian.
Well, they are Labour in name only, and they are in fact a disgrace to the genuine Labour voter, the traditional working class Labour voter who is patriotic and simply wants a better deal for them, in the same way that the previous Conservative government were complete traitors to the traditional Conservative voter, who again is patriotic and is the business owner who wants to be entrepreneurial and show his spirit and to be in part of a meritocracy.
Defiance Records, bringing you the best music from the movement. Ramisa's Never Give Up and Mad Mix's You're So Right are now available as a double A side on Defiance. And Raw Milk Conspiracy are bringing the purpose back to music with their latest single, This Is England 2024, and their brilliant debut, Misinformation Whore. Plus, now out is the fantastic Ballad of a Toolmaker's Son from Trevor John, all available from Defiance Records, the Freedom label.
He did what he was told to do back then, and that's how he got the number 10.
As a salad farmer, what obstacles have you come up against with actual tangible pollution? And obviously not pollution in regards to climate change, this and that. I'm talking about pollution like chemtrails, the soil being rendered inadequate or anything. Have you had any sort of issues like that?
I haven't had any noticeable issues with my soil. I'm still producing good crops. The best crops I produce are from my organic no-dig half an acre market garden. That grows wonderful veg, really, really good veg. but I am and have been aware of weather modification since the early 2000s, in fact. And I've seen it develop, and I can't say for sure exactly what's going on because obviously we're trying to reverse engineer what we're seeing. But there certainly has been a randomization of weather patterns. And I've certainly seen low pressure weather system extensions going on where, it sets fair and you think we could be set fair for a good 2 weeks like we used to be here. But after 2 or 3 days, we're seeing the trailing going on, and then the high level haze comes, and then hey presto, the next day you've got cloud. I can't say for sure whether that's going on, but all I know is I can't take it off the table.
Yeah, you have to consider it.
The options are on the table. And I read, going off topic, I'd been sort of aware that things weren't right in the world for quite a while, and then I read Where Did the Towers Go? By Dr. Judy Wood, which is a book about 9/11 and the use of directed energy weapon technology to actually crumble the towers down at the end, which was an absolute mind-blowing book for me, and a revelation that something very, very wrong is at play in the world.
Yeah.
So following on from that, like I say, I can't take anything off the table with this adversarial power that is clearly out there in the world.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you get told that 9/11 was a terrorist attack and then you actually go back and watch the footage, the buildings fall almost like a controlled demolition. Weirdly so. But, oh, sorry, I was just totally lost my train of thought. I have to cut that bit out. I just lost my train of thought.
I don't know if that helps. Sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah? I think we covered some of it. Okay, how far is it?
Protest with inheritance tax.
Okay.
How far you finally bring it.
Okay, yeah,
got it.
that's that. Yeah, I was about to ask you something that I actually
Sorry,
was quite a good point.
I dropped you down a rabbit hole there.
No,
didn't
no,
I?
no. Yeah, I was going to go with the rabbit hole. I was actually going to go with the rabbit hole, and it's just totally left. Anyway, no, it was a good point. I really want to remember it. No. It's okay. I forgot it before you said anything. Yeah. Oh, now I've remembered it. It was. Yeah, it was. Yeah. So was it that book that woke you up to everything that's going on, or was it something else?
It was that book that really woke me up. Yes, I'd been feeling that something wasn't right in the world, that human beings as people are inherently good, that we have good built into us, and that we want a world of nurture, protection, love, education, creativity, beauty, honesty, justice, truth, brotherhood. And that was not the construction that we were living in. So I'd been feeling that without being able to sort of put any pinpointed target on it. But yes, it was that book that woke me up. And I started researching geopolitics then, and cabalism, should I say, the very top ring of power and what their belief system is. Yes, from then on, I've, like I say, if somebody tells me something like there's been a mysterious fog and people have been poorly, or that the weather is being controlled, although I have no obvious proof of that myself, it remains on the table to be disputed or not. So yes, I try to keep an open mind about things.
Yeah. Bringing it back to the farming, obviously there's been rallies, there's been protests, there's been tractor convoys, which have been really cool. And there are a lot of farmers threatening to, shut down the ports, stop production, withhold food, but obviously they can only do that so much, especially if they have deals and everything and contracts in place. How far are you as a farmer willing to go to combat against the government? But just with any of this, really, how far are you willing to fight for your right to produce natural as possible, organic, lovely, healthy food?
we have no option but to challenge the inheritance tax proposed changes. Our backs have been against the wall for a long time, in fact, in farming, but the inheritance tax does represent an existential threat. It will result in the loss of land to many farms that will make them unviable economically. And we completely disagree with the Labour government stance that it will only affect around 500 farms a year. Both the National Farmers Union and the Country Landowners Association have both put their estimations at around 60 to 75% of farms will be affected. So we really have to resist this with all our might. We can't give in. We have to fight it. We have to fight it positively for as long as possible. And we have to keep the public on board. Now, as the conflict rolls out, that may not be possible in the end. Inconvenience will possibly have to happen. We don't want that, but we have to accept that. In some industrial disputes, inconvenience of the public always happens. If the train drivers go on strike, there's inconvenience to the public. So we don't want to be away from our farms. We want to be earning money and trying to keep our farms going, but we have got to fight and we cannot give in on where we're at now. So we've seen rolling blockades. We've seen the blockading of the Morrison's depot overnight, and that resulted in a statement the very next morning from Morrison saying that they support us and that they would stand with us against the Labour government, which is good news and a positive start. We'll see where we go on from there. But with Farmers to Action, which is the direct action network that are coordinating all of this, we have strategy options. We are a group who are not only farmers, but we're members of the public. So we are a hybrid organisation, a union, public campaign group partnership. And that gives us strategic options. And we will have to see how it goes from here. But yes, we're in this fight and we have to win it.
Well, speaking of conflicts, and obviously we've touched upon globalist agendas, the war between Russia and Ukraine, and obviously the sanctions that we've posed on Russia have had a knock-on effect with the price of fertilizer. Have you contested with that? What's the rise in the price? Just so to paint a picture, because obviously you say to the average person who's not a farmer, doesn't know any farmers, and you say, oh, the price of fertilizer is going up. How much has it gone up and how much has it actually affected you?
Well, it went up 3 or 4 times at its peak. So that was huge, absolutely huge. It has fallen back a bit now, but it's still more expensive than it was. And in the budget, the autumn budget statement was a proposed tax again for another £50 a tonne due to carbon emission issues, net zero again. So yes, it's you can't escape it. Every single where you turn, they are trying to make it more expensive for you to farm. So yes, it's a big issue. And input costs for the livestock and dairy sector have gone up in the past 5 years, anywhere between 40 and 55%.
Wow.
So, and your output costs haven't risen accordingly.
I was going to say, because has the prices of your food and your produce risen equally with inflation and things like that, or are you still earning from your produce the same that you were, I don't know, 10 years ago?
No, this is the moving goalpost theory, whereas we are constantly, as farmers, having to soak up that loss. Input prices go up. We can't raise our output prices up to match it. So therefore, there's a difference. Somebody's got to lose out. It's always the farmer. We soak it up. We end up doing more for the same output every time. So the goalposts keep getting moved. And before you know it, you're having to put hundreds and thousands of pounds worth of investment in to make the same money out. I mean, you only have to look at the size of farm required to make a full-time living income these days. On arable, it's around 500 acres. And, going back even 20, 30 years, you could have survived on half of that. Yeah. So, yes, it's being made very difficult for us, and we have to have a really good sort out now.
Yeah. Do you mind me asking how long you've been farming for?
I've been farming for 25 years.
Wow. And what's the degrade been like to watch? That when I say degrade, I mean the importance that you seem to have to the governments, whoever may have been power at whatever time, because obviously we seem to have lost, especially with the Labour government, we seem to have lost the incentive that without farmers, we have no food. Have you seen that? You've seen that deterioration in real time. What's that been like?
It's been very dramatic. I've seen land prices go from £2,000 an acre when I started to 11,300 an acre, which is obviously due to many factors. The fact that we don't have a nationalised land asset. Our land is available to be bought and invested into by anybody in the world. So we're a very small island, and our territorial acreage is essentially on the global investment market for it. You know, so this is crazy to start with. And then, of course, we've seen huge amounts of immigration coming over in recent years, and this is all putting development pressure on land. So these, put premium on land. So that's a reason for the land price increase. But in terms of the switch from farmers doing what they should always have done, which is core food production whilst being custodians of the land, to being environmental custodians of the land and delivering public goods for net zero whilst trying to fit in a bit of food growing along the side. That really came about from 2019 from the Agricultural Transition Plan, which again refers back to the 2008 Climate Change Act, which really laid out the whole carbon farming thing. You know, carbon emissions became the new thing. We had to audit everything and reach certain carbon dioxide emission reduction targets. So that's how we came to the 2019 Agricultural Transition Plan and the Sustainable Farm Incentive Scheme, which we have now, which has replaced the area-based payments, and it's about delivering public good through environmental action to our farmers. So that's been very quick, very rapid. And it does make me giggle because when the SFI was originally rolled out, they had 5 options where you could put your whole farm into non-food producing schemes, butterfly or wildflower schemes, we call them. And obviously quite a few people were putting their whole farms into these schemes because, to be honest, the money is pretty good. The money is better than growing crop.
Really? Isn't that just so telling, the fact that they'll pay you more for growing flowers
Yeah.
than they will for growing actual sustenance
Yeah.
for the nation?
Yeah. Well, DEFRA very quickly had to withdraw 3 of the schemes or limit them to 25% of your land in total, because they were obviously going to have a political hot potato on their hands. People were going, we'll just have a couple of years off. We'll put the bird seed in and just, do those buildings up, which we've been wanting to do for ages. So they had to very quickly backtrack on that, which I find amusing. But yes, the schemes... one YouTube channel I follow, Harry's Farm, don't know if you've seen that. He's got 350 acres of arable, and he is now growing 66% less food, and he's getting about the same more in profit.
Wow.
So 2/3 less food production equals 2/3 more profit because the environmental schemes pay more.
Wait, so is that because he's growing something different, or he's just not growing as much?
Because you take your costs of growing out. If you can get 750 or so per hectare for butterfly mix or non-harvested bird food, winter bird food, all you've got to do is drill that and put that in and leave it. You don't have to pay any of your growing costs, your contracting costs for that, your harvesting costs. So all in all, you're making more money by doing that. And
So
this is-
again, they're incentivizing
Yes.
not growing food.
Yes, it's deliberately engineered. And you can see that the decades and decades of this slow creeping war of attrition on profitability has been deliberate, because it's created this scenario where farmers are desperate for income. And then, hey, presto, along comes these schemes that can really give them quite a good bit of money. But it's about not growing food, of course. And they're selling it to them on, you're doing your bit for the environment, for net zero, and they're having to go along with it. So it's political coercion in funding. And that's been one of the most significant changes since the 2019 transition plan and the end of the basic payment scheme. It's been the dawning of the age of political coercion in funding. And this is this is why we have to get away from the current model that we're in of subsidized agriculture. We have to ditch the cheap food policy that we've been under since effectively the repeal of the Corn Laws in 1846. The cheap food policy, post-war cheap food policy especially, was all about selling us a socialist ideal of providing the urban working classes with cheap and affordable food. Sounds all very good. But of course, what it has done in reality is it's put dependency into agriculture through the subsidization of the industry. And it has, of course, set up the paradigm that cheap is good. And therefore, that's a huge demand driver for cheap imports, which at that time they knew they would be developing. And we're giving money away to actually build up the agricultural systems in these developing nations, which have got hugely different costs. So they can produce on vastly bigger economies of scale at cheaper prices. And the cheap food policy has actually been globalism by stealth. I believe we've been completely duped by it, and we need to get away from it and build a system where we are standing on our own 2 feet, and we have, instead of a cheap food policy, a real food policy that's based on local production, more regenerative practice, and more mixed farming. We need to get away from this 1,000-acre arable. We need to put livestock and dairy back in that. It will be better for the soil. It'll be better for closed loop production, where you're providing, through your arable production, you're providing the grain and the bedding for your own dairy or beef production, for example. So we can really do a lot of good by going back to this mixed farm type model. And it's really the big farming family, small state intervention, non-subsidy, direct sale, mixed farming system. That's where we really need to get it to. That's the agricultural restoration that we need to get to in the long term. Of course, in the short term, we need financial stability and we need food security stability. So we've got to do it differently in the short term. We need better funding in the short term and better policy management. But eventually, we have to get towards the agrarian restoration.
Yeah. So how would we do this? I mean, obviously, as we touched on earlier, there's been farmers' rallies, there's been protests, tractor convoys. What more can they do to get the government and get the general public to listen and to get more people to buy local?
By education and by sticking to our guns and by doing it for long enough and consistently enough for those changes to come through. It's about changing mindset. And it is coming through to farming. They're realizing that they were duped again with the dangling carrot of big supermarket contracts, go big, get rich, go in with the supermarkets. They're now realizing that that's not happening. Doesn't matter how big you go, they're always going to use their monopoly power against you and pay you a pittance. You could go up to 10,000 acres from 1,000 acres, but you're still going to be getting 8p for a bunch of carrots or whatever. So the awakening is coming that, we just need to get away from monopoly. We need to get away from dependency and start rebuilding it ourselves. And there's an inertia with that. It takes, farming's been going on since the dawn of time. And the policies that we're under now, the globalist policies, as I said, they really started around, nearly 200 years ago with the repeal of the Corn Laws. So there's a lot of inertia, and it's a slowing down of that. It's progressive. But people like myself and the other people that are here today, we just have to keep going. We stick at our guns. We keep educating. We keep doing what we're doing. And the message is getting through. And, you need to be the change and sing it from the rooftops. Keep using the farm shops. Your wallet is a weapon. Use your purchasing power properly and things will change.
I was just going to ask you to end on a message to the public or even to the government. I mean, not that they'd probably be watching, but if by any chance, just a message that you'd like to say to kind of encapsulate all of this.
Get behind the farmers. Stick with the farmers. In the coming industrial dispute that will come, it is coming, they will try their usual tactics of dividing and ruling. They will try to isolate farmers and separate us off from the herd so that we can be pilloried and beaten and discredited and smeared and slandered and all the rest of it. So please get with us. Understand that we're doing it for the greater good. Food security is national security. And we are campaigning not only to scrap inheritance tax for us, but to scrap it for everyone, because that's a very popular stance. We should reintroduce some form of legislation later down the line where it is still brought back in for the very large landowners to still have some regulatory effect on monopoly in large estates. That's a very good socialist policy that I would advocate for. But for the immediate term, we need to scrap it for everybody. So please get with your farmers. The farmers are fighting for their own livelihoods. They're fighting for the country. Get behind them and stick with them when the going gets tough.
Well, thank you so much for giving me some of your time. For more exclusive behind-the-scenes content, please be sure to subscribe to our Patreon. It really helps us cover the cost of any live streams, events, protests, or anything that we do. You'll also be seeing any behind-the-scenes footage and anything that we might be doing with Defiance Records.
Resistance GB's new series, 1,000 Words, has me, portrait artist Jake Fern, talking to some of the key figures in the movement. Half of my brain concentrating on having a conversation, and the other half on making a painting. Do I succeed at either? You be the judge.